Thank you very much for the conversation about that. I just want to ask you one last thing on a completely different topic before we go while I'm here in Australia, and that is that there's a social media ban that's just been approved by the Australian Senate, which is going to come in about 12 months' time for under 16s. So a lot of the work that I do is working in the space of empowering parents around their kids and finding out all the things that are going wrong with kids in society that's making raising kids and being a kid quite challenging. And we know that social media is part of the problem. What kids are being able to access online and what they see that their parents have no idea about, information coming in, it's causing harm. So a lot of people on the side of understanding all of that might think that this bill is a great thing because we see that there is a concern happening. However, there's some missing information about this. The BBC is touting it as saying it's the world's strictest law, which is really interesting. So I'd love your thoughts on that. But the other side of it is that the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, actually is saying that this legislation is needed to protect young people from the harms of social media. So he sounds like he's coming out on the side of people like us, but I have a suspicion there's a lot more to this than meets the eye. So what are your thoughts on this?
Loaded question. You talked about, you mentioned empowering parents. Now, I'm all for empowering parents. So this is about empowering governments to get into that relationship between parents and children. Now, of course, they like to wrap these things up in warm and fuzzy language, and he's very funny. You watch the longer outtakes of Albanese before a speech when he has his couple of sips of water, and then he quickly puts on his crying face and his quivering lip and tells Australia how much he loves and cares for our children of Australia. And it's embarrassing. I'll be honest. It's ridiculous. It's clearly the idea is not to protect children. If they wanted to protect children, they would have put the same ban on pornography and pornographic websites. But of course, children are still allowed to look at those. It's just social media. I mean, the hypocrisy and the ridiculousness of this is so dark. But you know, this evil that we're fighting in the world is a real evil, and it has agendas to do everything to demoralise our nations, to take away any kind of traditional, ethical, Christian values that our nations were built upon, became the great countries of New Zealand and Australia, became built on these amazing ideals. And these are clearly being targeted. This bill for under 16s and social media is it's clearly a Trojan horse to hopefully Australians are silly enough to believe that the government has the best interests of the children at heart as they force the rest of us to some sort of Chinese-style social credit system, which obviously is affiliated with a digital identity. And there's two things that these people need to close out their ultimate control grid in not just Western countries, but in countries all over the world, every country in the world. And that is digital ID, of course, and then, central bank digital currencies. So this is dangerous territory where we are so close to being forced to use digital identity to access our social media. And once we have a phone that is allowed to scan our face every 30 seconds or whatever the rule may be for us to access our own social media, all these digital biometrics become linked and this becomes normalised and people become accepting of this, then it's a very small step to a society that's already using their phones to tap and pay, and it's just this one step more that they sell it to us. They package it as this convenient, safe, warm and fuzzy protecting the children language that the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and certainly we are skating on very thin ice in this country right now. And if this obviously it's now been passed, it was passed with support from both sides of government, and the Australians were given 24 hours to make submissions. Normally we'd be given a month. This was rammed through secretly on the same day that another 30-something bills, I believe, were passed through without any debate in the Senate. If people think that they're doing this for some kind of decent, moral, altruistic reason, then I've got an oceanfront property in Alice Springs to sell you. If you know the geography, you'd understand the stupidity of that comment.
People are not looking deep enough at it. They're not looking below
Well,
surface.
They haven't had a chance to look at it because we were given 24 hours. It passed through the lower house without debate. It were given 24 hours in the upper house, and people only knew about the 24 hours because a few activists were following closely what was going on with this because of everyone being so scared of this ridiculousness and the dangerousness of this bill. And of course, there was 24 hours to make submissions, and regardless of the outcome of the submissions, they still pushed it through anyway. So we know they had massive pushback, thousands and thousands of people making submissions in the very limited time frame open, but it was a bipartisan thing. So it begs the greater question: is who is really in charge? Because this is clearly. It's clearly not these wannabe or so-called leaders of our two major parties, the Liberal Party or the Labor Party. It's clearly, this is coming from above, and we saw this very much through the COVID days, when every country in the world, or every Western country in the world, on the same day would be saying we need to push this from 11 to 6-year-olds today, 6 to 11s. So we're. And it was just, the orders were coming from up high, and they were always the safe and effective mantra, and all these one-liners that we kept hearing from Build Back Better, and all these ridiculous lines that they were told to say. At the same day that Biden started saying Build Back Better, Trudeau's saying Build Back Better in Canada, and Cindy Ardern is saying it in New Zealand, and Scott Morrison saying it here, and it's just like, it's embarrassing to see that they're talking from the same script. And it's who is writing the script, because these are not just, of course, Australia and New Zealand were very much used as testing grounds for many draconian and authoritarian laws and rules through COVID, as was Canada and UK. UK is in front of us on much of this social media stuff. So, they're arresting now several thousand people per year for making posts that oppose government narrative on simple things such as immigration policy. And so it's the control grid is closing in very quickly, and I do fear for the what we leave for our grandchildren if we don't stand up today and these things. But this not misinformation, this digital ID and social media 16-year-old restriction bill is just, it's so embarrassingly ridiculous that I've had friends from all over the world commenting on this in the last 24 hours, and they're saying, "How did you let this through?" And I was like, I'm asking the same question. And again, it's it's just a great shame that this country that we thought, this free democratic society we thought we had, is getting very close to becoming a technocratic, authoritarian, maybe a technocracy. We're in uncharted waters right now, and certainly it's not to be rolled out before the next election. But sadly, the other side of politics in this country supports it. So I'm hoping Australians are wise enough to look for a new party, or look for a new person to be voting for, or good people to become in these parties that can maybe change from within, because right now we have the most pathetic and embarrassing group of people sitting in that big building in Canberra that I'm not sure what happened to the days of statesmen and decency and transparency in politics, but certainly it's a relic of a foregone era in Australia, and if we don't turn it around quickly, then I'm not sure how this country will, it'll certainly it won't be the country we remember from, certainly the one I grew up in.
No, I think too, and the closing statement is, any time that the government wants to impose more legislation in order to try and fix something, is they're taking the empowerment away from the people, and particularly in this one where it's about the children. It's the state deciding what's best for the child, and while on the face of it, we know that it causes harm, what it's actually doing is the state is taking of the parent. The parent sees that there's an issue with their own child. You can go right back to the gran you live in a home. If a parent and a child are having a problem with their social media use, that should be able to be dealt with in the home, under the value and the values guidance of the parent, and maybe with support of the wider thing. But it shouldn't be something that is derived from a legislation from above that's directing how that conversation is to go in the home, right? That's the way that I look at it. And so if society are quite happy of co-opting their responsibility to the government to tell them what to do, we're in a really big mess here. But my hope is that as these things become more insane and draconian, and we are more courageous about being able to talk about it, people will start scratching their heads and start to be like, hang on, do I want to live in this world where I literally am just told what to do from when I get up in the morning? Or do you think that it's a better way to live, to actually be given some self-autonomy to be able to decide these things on behalf of my own children? You mentioned that this bill isn't to be, enacted into law until 12 months from now. There's a clear, and it became very obvious to me as you said it, that this is, we've obviously got an election before, and I can imagine how it is going to go. If they rolled this out before the election, both parties are going to be in a world of hurt, because there's going to be a bunch of 14 and 15 and 16-year-old kids across Australia that are going to be, giving their parents a lot of grief about not being able to use their social media coming into this election early in the new year. It's any time between March and May. We don't know the dates yet, but
But certainly, as you said, the state stepping into the role of parenting, it's become more that way. We've seen that through unfortunately, the women's liberation movement, and women now entering the workforce, and the government have two sources of two taxable sources of income, and basically leaving the child to be educated and raised by the state. And of course, that comes with its vaccination mandates and everything else, and it's a sad state of affairs. Not saying that I'm anything against women's rights, and women, as important in society as anything that men can do, and in many ways far more important, because they've been to the family, and they are the life givers and the life providers in this world. So, I'm sad that importance has been taken away from, and focus put more on careers, and certainly than the family. And we've seen sort of sadly bringing Western societies into negative population growths, and it's certainly changing how our cultures look. But we're getting into a much deeper thing. But the government is getting more and more into the hands into that parent and child relationship, and I don't see anything good in that coming of that scenario. So
it's not going so well so far, and I can't see it turning direction. It's a final comment from me, but actually a really interesting point that you just raised about if it's not through for 12 months, and the young people who are already accessing social media and the heat they're going to put on their parents. And you're right about that, because it's the same here as in our country, but the children at school now are being taught all about what their legal rights are, and that really worries me, because they're legalising a child who's a minor to actually display and enforce their rights on both parents and also teachers. I believe, and I have experienced, that what really rolls out of that is a generation of tyrants and narcissists. So if you've got young people who are really talking about their rights and getting angry about their rights, and then they know that they're about to have this thing come in, they ain't going to be happy. It's not going to be a pleasant place for a lot of families and homes, right? Who are talking about that. So yeah, interesting. The government seems to think it's okay to keep overreaching into what would be parental roles, which is concerning. So anyway, that was a really long chat. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, no, Penny, thanks a million for flying across the country and being here, and of course to Steve, hidden behind the camera over there. But no, honoured that you guys made the journey. It's a long way to come for a short 4-hour trip, 4-hour event, but 2 days of travelling for 4 hours on the ground. But I'm stoked you've been able to spend a few extra days and get to hang out and learn about the eels of New Zealand, and I can share a few of the eels of Australia, and hopefully come up with ways to turn it around.